All right, everybody, welcome into the newest podcast for Strange Appalachia. Continuing with our Halloween theme for the month of October, we're going to be talking about traveling spirits tonight and tell a couple of personal stories and talk about some of the individual traveling spirits we've found stories of uh, here over the past few weeks.
Yeah, when we're talking about traveling spirits, we're meaning any type of spirit that traditionally haunts roadways, railways, bridges. You usually see the traditional one is the woman in white, where it's a woman that walks by the road. Sometimes people pick her up and she disappears in their car. The other type is called dead man's curves, and supposedly when you go around these curves, accident victims that have died on the curve will appear in your back seat. The legends usually state that you have to go around the curve at a certain time, usually around midnight. I also have a story that I found local here to me in Briceville, Tennessee, about a spirit that haunts a bridge on a train track, and you hear a lot of those types of things too. So all three of those stories are pretty common in rural areas, especially in the Appalachian Mountains. I think the most common woman in white is actually found in Chicago. She haunts a cemetery out there, and then supposedly a guy actually took her to a dance or went to a dance, and she was there and danced with her. So
Hmm.
pretty cool stories.
So, do you want to start with the woman in white stories? I know that's the one that you have a personal story about. So you want to go with that, and then I'll about mine.
Well, I don't really have a personal story about the woman in white. I don't think I've ever encountered one. Um, I know that there are two traditionally, at least two in in the Wise County area. One of them is called Walking Susie, and the other one is called Walking Sally. And there may be a third one down the Back Valley Road, but I've not got as many reports of that one. Um, one of them, one of them supposedly walks from Norton, Virginia to Appalachia, Virginia. It's the old, they call it Old Norton Highway. Sometimes you hear people call it that. And there's actually a dead man's curve there that supposedly, if you come around, it's about halfway from Norton to Appalachia. If you come around that curve at midnight, supposedly, there's a guy that'll appear in your back seat. And Walking Susie will supposedly walk down to the high school and she'll disappear there. And the legend is that she was a student that was left at a dance one night and she went out and killed herself. There's no reports of that. You won't find any history on that. Uh, but it's still a story nonetheless. And I know that from personal experience, I know that the Dead Man's Curve there, I've been around it at midnight many, many times trying just to see what I could see to get something to appear in my back seat. And it's never happened. But I know people that are terrified that will make sure that they're nowhere near that curve at midnight. So it's a pretty scary story, I think. It would be terrifying, I know, to have that happen to you.
Yeah, to be driving along, at any point in time doesn't necessarily have to be midnight, but certainly amplified the later at night you get, and look up in the back seat and there be a ghostly figure there, or anything there really, ghostly or otherwise, that you're not prepared to be there is definitely going to be terrifying.
The other place in Wise County that has these stories is Irondale Road, and that's where I know your experience happened at. But on Irondale Road, there's two spirits, I guess you could call them. One of them is a woman in white, and she'll actually walk that road and then go out toward Cracker's Neck and walk. And I think that's Walking Sally is what they call her. And the other one, that road actually, there's supposedly a demon that's supposed to walk up and down that road. Um, it's described as having cloven hooves and red hair. I know that I heard a report of it supposedly locking some kids in a bedroom and telling them that no matter how loud they screamed, that their parents would never hear them. And eventually, the mother was wondering why it was so quiet and went back there and found the kids, just terrified. Actually, they said the little boy had actually peed on himself. He was so scared, and so the that's a pretty terrifying report. I don't know how much truth there is behind it. It was a secondhand report, but that area is supposed to be a hot spot for that demon.
Yeah. So you're talking about my experience there. Um, Based on talking to you, uh, talking about these with you, the demon and the walking lady in white, walking Sally, walking Susie, whichever one she is, I believe occur sort of on the other side of Irondale Road from where my experience happened. But again, that's not a great distance for anybody that's not familiar with the area. It's far enough away that it, you know, probably what 2-3 miles.
Yeah, if that.
Yeah, so I mean it's a distance away, but it's not a huge distance away. So my experience, I was coming home one night. I'd been at a meeting in Johnson City, which is about an hour and a half from my house, and coming back. This is sort of the shortcut road, I guess you would say, the easiest way to get from Interstate 23 to our house. 23 is right, correct?
Yeah, it's 23.
Okay, so I was coming home. It was probably 10 o'clock at night, maybe 10:30, somewhere in that range. And as you exit the 4 lane and get onto Irondale Road, you go across some railroad tracks and immediately make a left turn. And as I'm making that left turn, there is a man, or what appears to be a man, a shadow of a man, standing in the road with his back to me. And it looked like, just based, again, all I saw was a silhouette or a shadow, but it was dark enough that it looked like there was a person standing there, and my headlights were shining on him. And it looked like he was looking back over his right shoulder, um, looking at me, about to hit him, basically. And so as soon as I saw him, instinct kicked in. I hit the brakes, uh, sort of braced myself as hard as I could, and sort of squinted my eyes. So much adrenaline was going through me when I saw him standing there. I don't know whether I can tell you completely I closed my eyes or if I just, shut them enough that I couldn't see everything. But when I remember looking again, or when I remember looking up, nobody's there. And if anybody's familiar with the area, or even if you're not familiar, the left side of the road is um, there's a train track there, and it's sort of up on a hill, but it starts immediately beside the road. So, uh, it's not possible that this guy dodged and went up that, because you got a bunch of that loose, bigger rock. So he couldn't have gone up that side. And the other side of the road is sort of a bramble patch, or just a really grown up area. Got a lot of weeds, a lot of briars and stuff like that. And I mean, it's possible that if it was an actual person that was in the road, they jumped out of the road that way. But uh, the likelihood of them doing that's not very high, because, or at least without me seeing them, because they I would have been able to see the weeds moving and the briars moving and stuff like that. Um, so really odd experience. I know I definitely saw this thing, this shadow. Sorry, I'm fighting a sinus infection at the same time here. Um, but you know, thinking back on some of the earlier stories we've told, we've talked about the dog man and some of that stuff, and some of our possible real life explanations um, are, people hallucinating with sleep deprivation and stuff like that. Um, and that's something that my mind always goes to. Uh, the thing for me is I know I have been more tired than that in my life. I mean, I was tired. I'm not going to deny the fact that I was tired. So it definitely could have been that, but that's the only time I've ever experienced anything like that. And I know there have been times in my life that I have been way more sleep deprived than I was that night. I mean, I'd had a full amount of sleep. I wasn't necessarily, fighting sleep trying to drive back home. It was just sort of later. So can I rule out for certain that it was, just my mind playing tricks on me? No, I can't. And the more I think about it, the more I think that that's the most likely explanation. But at the same time, it will, I saw what I saw, and trying to convince myself otherwise has definitely been a lot harder than I expected it to be. Because I know as soon as I saw that it disappeared, my first thought was to call you and see if you'd ever heard any stories, and that's you just like we talked about earlier with the demon and the walking lady in white, walking Sally, or whatever that one is. Um, neither of those really fit what I saw, because what I saw wasn't cloven hooves, wasn't red hair. It was, a silhouette of a person.
There's
So,
a, there's a lot of things in that area that are associated with spirits. There's a crossroads. There's actually two crossroads on the area. There's a train track. There's a willow tree, and those are always associated with uh, with widow spirits. So there's a lot of things in that area that are associated with spirits. Now, whether those things have anything to do with the price of gold in China, I don't know. But I
yeah,
know
who knows?
railroads and uh, the four-way stops are always crossroads, I guess you'd call them. They're always associated with something demonic.
Mm,
And who knows why? Who knows how that came up?
yeah,
It's just one of those things that stories are always told about. Now, these urban legends, um, all of these urban legends are something that's associated not only throughout the Appalachian Mountains, but throughout America. The woman in white is probably the most common ghost story told. I imagine. I can't think of any other that would be told more. Um, you always have the urban legends about to keep kids from going out and parking, so to speak. So they'll talk about, a lot of times you'll hear about goat men or a
right.
serial killer or somebody died there. Um, but the woman in white is a very, very interesting case because a lot of the people that you meet that have seen them, they'll swear to it. You can't make them change their story, and it happens all over the place. So it's extremely common, and we've got two there in Wise County. The other Dead Man's Curve is actually going up Norton Mountain. Anybody that's ever traveled down the Back Valley Road, uh, going towards Norton, up towards the highway there, the very
Right.
first curve you come to at the mountain there it's a horseshoe curve. It's almost 360 or pretty close to 360.
Yeah.
And that curve, the story is that a coal truck driver actually went off the backside of that curve, and his ghost will appear in your back seat at midnight. Once again, I've done it many times, and I've not had a crazy coal miner appear in my back seat.
Yeah, no, I've definitely never experienced either of those. While we're talking about the spirits associated with roadways or the traveling spirits, another common one in Northeast Tennessee that I don't know how. We talked about doing this episode for a month now, and this hadn't come up, so I'm going to throw it out. And if we want to use it as a teaser for a different episode, or if you want to go ahead and talk about it, we can go with it. But in Kingsport, Tennessee, there's a place called Sensabaugh Tunnel. Do you want to hit that tonight, or do you want to wait and hit it another night?
We can talk about it a little bit tonight. It's worth doing an entire episode over. So basically, the
Definitely.
Bar Tunnel, there's a couple of different stories behind it. One of them is that a maniac or a crazy man, a psycho, kidnapped a baby and took it into that tunnel and drowned it. Um, and the Sinzabal was the last name of the family that this supposedly happened to. Another one is that the father, Mr. Sinzabal, he's actually the one that went crazy and took the baby in there and killed it. Um, and so you see, you supposedly can go in there, you can hear a baby crying, you can hear laughing, you can hear people walking. There's a creek that actually flows through the tunnel, and I actually had a friend of mine that in the early 2000s he went over there to do an investigation, and he didn't have a video recorder because at the time they were harder to get a hold of than they are now. But he had a tape recorder, and he recorded some stuff in the tunnel. And actually, he recorded you could hear some footsteps through the tunnel and actually out into the water.
Hmm.
So it's a pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting story.
Yeah, I will say it. I've been there. I've never went at night like the stories supposedly say. You know, that's when you get your most activity. Supposedly, you go in there at night and you turn your car off and it won't turn back on for several attempts, and then once it finally turns on, you drive out. There's little kids' handprints on the tailgate or on the bumper. You know, on the doors, different places. Um, and that's an interesting thing because you see that several different stories have that. You know, that same story of handprints appearing, and as interesting as that is when that happens, that has a very natural explanation a lot of times. Especially in a tunnel, it's likely to the pressure is likely to be higher in there. Just because it's closed off, it's likely to be colder, and those sort of factors go together, and it's going to cloud up. And if there's ever been somebody put a hand on a bumper or on a door, that's when it's going to show up. That print's just sort of magically going to appear, if you want to say it that way. But it's been there the whole time. The atmosphere just hasn't been right for it. So I noticed, you know, sitting out here in the front yard, if it's really cold one morning, I'll go out and my truck will have handprints on the back tailgate, and you know, it sort of freaked me out the first time it happened, but I started thinking about it a little bit more, and you know, it was a week after you had come up and visited and brought Arlie with you, and I remembered just sort of offhand Arlie putting his hands in those areas where those handprints are. So it didn't leave the handprint then, but it did, you know, the next weekend when it was cold, or sometime during that week when it was cold.
You'll
So
see that. You'll see that same thing happen to Bigfoot researchers, where they'll have a group of them go out in the field, and they'll come back, and there'll be a handprint on their car that they can't match, and it doesn't look right. And what'll happen is some other researcher will have touched a window and maybe slid his hand or smeared something, you know,
yeah,
and then they'll go, it's Bigfoot, when really it's just one of their handprints.
yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen that debunked. Um, the last story I want to tell tonight with the traveling spirits is actually it occurs in Briceville, Tennessee, and it's the Drummond Railroad Bridge is what it's called. And supposedly in 1893, a guy named Dick Drummond was hung there, and you can drive by that bridge or you can walk on that bridge, and you can actually see the spirit supposedly, especially on a cold night. Um, and the interesting thing is he was hung during the Civil War, I believe is what it said. Or no, excuse me, not the Civil War, the Cold War. They had a Cold War there in Briceville, Tennessee, and they caught him and hung him on that bridge. That's something that's local to this area. So once again, that's a thing kind of like the Sensabaugh Tunnel. It's kind of a teaser. We can do a whole episode on it. And actually, both those places, Sensabaugh and that bridge, uh, we can visit both of those places at some point in time, I'm sure.
Very cool. And I think it's worth mentioning. Anything else you want to talk about the traveling spirits before we sort of wrap up here?
No, other than my phone's getting blown up all of a sudden.
Oh, well, if you hear any weird buzzes, that's Charlie's phone. Um, but I think it's worth mentioning we did make another attempt at a live investigation this weekend, and you know, the weather held off, looked pretty good most of the day. We got where we were going and got hit with a giant rainstorm. Had to leave. So that's about the way our luck has gone here the last 2 months attempting these investigations.
Yeah,
Um,
we got about 45 seconds worth of video, which, that's not even enough.
yeah, we did get to see a bear. Not very often you see that. Uh, so that was cool. We posted those pictures on the Facebook page. If you don't follow us on Facebook, that's probably the best way to keep up with us. So roll on over there and check out our page, Strange Appalachia. Uh, I've also noticed that it's getting sort of hard to find some of our older videos on YouTube. It seems like after about a month, some of them are sort of getting hidden. I don't know if anybody else has had that, but I've had several people mention that, and I've ran into the same issue. So during this week, I'm going to work on trying to upload these videos to Facebook, so they're a little easier to find. Apparently, that's slow going. I'm still waiting on one to upload right now. So
And
keep in touch with that.
I was going to throw it out there too. If you check out those pictures, there's two really good bear tracks on there that I posted that are double steps. You can
Yes,
see what we're talking about, and you can see how easily it would be to mistake that for a more humanoid footprint. And those were in sync. Those were one right after the other. And so if you were to track that bear, you would actually run into more human-looking footprints than bear footprints. So if you were inexperienced in the forest, or even if you were experienced in the forest and weren't really paying attention, and you came across that, uh, it would be very easily to mistake those for a Bigfoot or for a person walking around with no shoes on.
certainly. And they were very convincing. We put our best pictures of them on that Facebook post. So definitely, if you're not following us on Facebook, go check those out. Um, Anything else you want to throw in?
Uh, no, I'm good. I think that's it.
All right. As always, guys, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Go check us out on Facebook, and we'll see you next week.
See you guys.
Hopefully before next week. Actually, we're gonna hopefully get another episode in the next day or two. But see you later.